Hello there, I'm Thundaga, and welcome to my How to Make a Pokemon Game tutorial series. This series will cover all of the essential info that you need to make a Pokemon game in RPG Maker and Pokemon Essentials. In this episode, we'll discuss how to connect two maps together using map connections. First, we'll update our test town map a little bit and we'll add a pathway out of the map. Along the way, we'll also discuss some additional mapping pro tips. Secondly, we'll create a new map, which we'll call Route 1. And lastly, we'll connect the two maps together by using the map connections debug and test it out in-game. With all of that said, let's get into it. Alright, let's update our test town map so it's a little bit more cleaned up and it has a pathway going out of the map. I'd like to add a circle of trees around the map, as well as move these two homes closer to the center of the map. To move these homes, what I could do is go to their lair and then right-click them and paint them again, but I think this is a very good opportunity to show off the Shift Map tool. To open the Shift Map tool, all you need to do is press left Control and T. From here, we can select the direction that we'd like to shift our map, as well as the number of tiles. I'd like to shift these homes to the right over a bit, and let's say about 8 tiles. Then from here, we just hit OK, and look at that, it shifted everything over. Now, let's shift them down a little bit. Let's shift them, let's say down 6 tiles. And there we go. One thing that's also really cool about using the Shift Map tool is that it also moves over all the events on your map. This way, if you have a more complicated map with a lot of events, you can move everything over and not have to stress about dragging over every event to a new spot. Shift Map also moves any tiles that were on the edge of the map over to the opposite edge. So for example, let's open up the Route 3 map that came with Pokemon Essentials and start shifting things over. As you can see here, along the left edge of the map, there's a lot of trainer events. And then if we use Control T and then select left and shift it over like 12 tiles, we'll notice that the events and everything else on that edge has now shifted over to the right edge of the map. Everything that overruns the edge will then fill in on the opposite edge. Now let's undo that, and to undo it, what we can do is just use Control T and shift everything to the right 12 tiles. And bada boom, it's like no changes were ever made. One thing you'll notice that I did there also is that I used middle click to quickly pan around the map. By pressing in the mouse wheel or middle click, you can change the cursor here and scroll through the map very quickly. I use this all the time to move around the larger maps, and it's very convenient. I recommend that you get used to using middle click to pan around the maps. As a quick note, we'll be using the base maps that came with Pokemon Essentials, such as Route 3 here, a lot, so make sure not to delete these maps. They're extremely useful, and they have a lot of good examples of events in them. Now, let's go back to Test Town and begin adding our trees. What I like to do when I paint trees is I like to go in and select the bottom 2x2 section of the tree and begin painting that around the edge of the map. Then, once I have a nice big rectangle painted, what I can do is right click and drag and select that and begin painting this as a big rectangle of trees. Then I like to go into the third layer and paint the top 2 tiles of trees on the third layer. We can paint a few of these toppers on a couple of trees, and then we can use the same method that we just did where we can right click and select, but make sure to also right click and select the row of tiles above. Then what we can do is just left click and drag this selection and make sure that our trees all look nice here. To double check, we can always press the F4 key and bada boom, we can see our trees are looking good. This is the way that I generally like to paint my trees, where I have the base and bottom half on the second layer, and then the topper above on the third layer. I'm gonna generally be referring to these 2 tiles here as the topper of the tree, by the way, for reference. These are little tree toppers. One important thing that you should also keep in mind when you're adding trees around the map is what I like to call the buffer. This is how many tiles we want to have between the player and the edge of the map. The player can see 8 tiles to their left and right, and 6 tiles above and below, so that means we want a buffer of at least 8 on the left and right edges of our map, and at least 6 on the top and bottom edges. In a little bit, I'll show an example of this in-game, where we have a buffer of only 4 along the top and bottom, and a buffer of 6 along the left and right, and we'll be able to see out of the map. Thankfully, those tree chunks on layer 2 are 2x2 squares, so an easier way of thinking about this is that the buffer that we want is 4 trees along the left and right edges of our map, and 3 trees along the top and bottom. Now real quick, I'm gonna go in and start painting some trees. Let's go in here, right click and drag, and look at this, we can paint trees really fast this way. I was gonna recommend maybe doing like a time lapse or something, but we don't even need that because look at that. We can already paint trees super easily. You'll notice right here at the very top though that I only have 2.5 trees as the buffer, so let's add one more row at the very top here. And then to prove a point, let me delete this tree. We'll notice right here that the buffer is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll test that out in game, but I'm promising you we'll be able to see out of the map. Let's also do that here. See, this buffer is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This buffer is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if we stand in these tiles here, we'll probably be able to see out of the map. So let's just see how it looks in game when we have an incorrect buffer set up. To do this, let's save our map real quick, and then let's go and hit play to begin play testing the game. Alright, I'm booted into Test Town, so now let's test out this buffer. This is one of the most common mistakes that people make in their very first fan game, so what I recommend is that whenever you're playing your game, walk along the edges of the map and make sure that you can't see out of the world like this. That's not looking very good, so what we want to do is make sure that we always have that layer of 4 trees, or sorry, that row of 4 trees here. I guess it's more of a column, but either way, make sure that we have 4 trees along the left edge of our map, as well as the right edge of our map to make sure that we can't see out of the world. And also, let's showcase this along the top of our map. If we go here, it looks fine. If we go here, we can actually see out of the map. The reason for that is the tiles above us is not within our buffer range. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiles above us when we should really have 6. Once we're here, we can't see out of the map anymore. So that's something that you should very much consider when working on your map for your Pokemon game. Alright, so we've talked about buffers a lot, and I'll fix those mistakes now, but let's get past that and let's start making a pathway out of our map so that way we can go to the right and go to Route 1. What we can do to make our pathway is we can just go onto layer 1 here and select a nice path. I think I like this sandy path here. What we can do is we can right click and drag this central column here, and then within our map we can left click and drag to begin painting our pathway. We can then also select the leftmost column here of this sandy square and then paint that, and look at that, our pathway has a nice little ender here. If we wanted to get fancy with this, we could always make this pathway have some curves and some bends and maybe have it corner down and wrap around into our homes here. But for now, let's just keep it simple and make it a straight line. Since we want this pathway to lead into our next map, what we should do is also make sure that it runs all the way to the edge of the map here. And let me clean that up a little bit. There we go. Once again, the right click and drag, very, very useful. What we should also do is go into layer 2 here and get rid of some of the trees that are in the way of our pathway. So what we can do is right click and drag some empty space here and then begin left clicking, and bada boom, look at that, we have our little path out of the map. Since we'll be walking to our Route 1 map by going to the right, we could always reduce our buffer a bit on the right edge, as long as Route 1 and Test Town together have no empty space. Because in theory, Route 1 will be here along the right edge of our map, we won't be able to see out of the world because Route 1 will just be there. To reduce the buffer on our right edge, we could just trim all these tiles. To reduce our right edge of our map, let's go into the map properties for our Test Town, and then we can just reduce the width. I'm gonna reduce the width by 6, so it's gonna go down from 40 to 34, which means what we'll be doing is losing the 3 trees along the right edge of our map. What we can do is set that value to 34 and then just hit OK. And there we go. As an important note, reducing the width or height will always trim from the right and bottom of the map respectively. So if you ever want to reduce from the left or top edges, make sure to shift the map left or up so that way the part that you want to cut out has been overrun to the opposite end of the map, and then reduce the width or height by the corresponding amount. Now, let's make our Route 1 map. Do note that whenever you make a new map, it'll be placed underneath the map that you had selected in the map browser at that time. As you can see, I had Route 3 selected when I made Test Town. To reorganize these maps, you can just left click on them and drag them to be either under a different map or in their own section if you left click and drag them all the way to the very top. Each map that has maps underneath it will have a plus icon next to it that can be clicked to expand and see the full list. Or if you press the minus icon instead, you can close that list. As we can see in some of these test maps, a good example is Cedolan City, this has its own list of submaps underneath, as well as a map that then has submaps underneath that. We have the Pokemon Center and the gym and the department store, and then every floor of the department store is then nested under that first floor, so they're all grouped together. It's a very good idea to use this feature and keep related maps next to each other underneath a common map, such as the maps being split up per town or city. Alright, so let's make our Route 1 map underneath our test town map so that way they're next to each other in our map browser. What we can do is make sure our test town is selected and then right click and select new map. Alright, now let's name our map Route 1. And then for the tile set, let's go with outside still because we want it to be also an outside map. And then for our size, let's just go something like 30 by 30. I think that's a decent size for our first route. Now, what we gotta do is we also wanna choose some really cool Route 1 music, and thankfully, I believe Pokemon Essentials already comes with a couple route options. Here we go. Let's listen to Route 1. I'm certain that this song is gonna friggin' slap. Ooh. Oh yeah. See, now that's a very good song for our first route. What we can do is we can adjust the volume a little bit. I like to bring the volume down to 80 sometimes. We can also adjust the pitch. If you wanna listen to some very cursed Route 1 music, you can lower it down to 50% pitch, and let's see how that sounds. That's actually not that bad. I'm gonna take it back up to pitch 100 though. But pitch 50 didn't sound that bad. All right, now let's hit OK, and bada boom, our empty map has been created. Let's start by going to layer 1 and filling in some grass again. Once again, we can select grass here in our tile set list and then paint bucket and bada boom. Just like that, we've got layer 1 complete. Since we want this map connection to look good though, let's make sure that the pathway from Test Town lines up well with the pathway that we're going to be adding to Route 1, as well as make sure that the trees kind of line up. And there's a very easy way to do this. Once again, my secret is using right click and drag. What I'm going to do is just right click and drag this pathway from layer 1 and go into Route 1 and paste it right about here or so. I think that'll be fine. Now let's go to layer 2 and do the exact same with our trees. What I'm gonna do is just copy this section of trees right here, because if we can then go into Route 1 and click this, we can try to get the pathway to have the exact same spacing so that way our map connection will look consistent. Now, that process works and all, but what if I told you that there was an even easier way to copy these tiles over? Real quick, what I'll do to make a point is I'll delete the trees and pathway that we just set up here in favor of showing you how to use the select tool. When we use right click and drag, we can only select one layer at a time, but by using the select tool, we can select tiles from all 3 layers at the same time. To begin using the select tool, navigate up here to the top bar and click on the select tool icon right here to the right of the paint bucket tool. Now let's head over to Test Town and start selecting some tiles here. Since we're currently viewing layer 1 here, let's press F4 so we can see all the tiles on our map. Then, with our select tool, we can left click and drag the tiles that we want to select. From here with our selection, we can left click and drag again to move the selection around, or we could just press delete to straight up delete those tiles. As you can see, it deleted those tiles from all 3 layers. I kinda liked those tiles though, and I want them back, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna press Ctrl Z to undo that. Another thing we can do with our select tool though, is we can left click and drag the selection here along the map edge, and we can press Ctrl C to copy that selection. Then what we can do is we can navigate back to Route 1, click anywhere on the map, and then press Ctrl V to paste that selection. And wouldn't you know, it selected those tiles from multiple layers. Then what we can do is we can just move it along the left edge here, and then bada boom. What I'll do now is I'll also get in there and paint a couple more trees. Look at that, bada boom. So the select tool is a very useful tool that I would recommend that you get the hang of using because it allows you to copy tiles from multiple layers at the same time. And this is very useful for more complex maps that have tiles on all 3 layers. Now what I'm gonna do real quick is I'm also gonna fill out some more trees on our first route here. Look at that, don't you just love right click and drag? Look at that, it makes it so easy to just add a bunch of trees. You could say it's treesy. Hey, all right. Bad jokes aside, let's go in really quick and let's also add some bushes to our first route. These won't have any wild Pokemon in them just yet, because there's still some additional setup that we gotta do. But for now, I think that's looking pretty good for our first route. Our first route has a lot of grass, as you can see. All right, I think this is enough for us to get started with a map connection. Really quick, I'm gonna fill in the dirt pathway here as well. Let's do that. Yeah. All right, now let's connect these maps. To connect them, first I'm gonna save real quick, and then let's boot up our game. The way that the map connections are done are actually through the debug menu. So let's get into our test town. To open the debug menu at any time, you can open the pause menu or press the F9 key. I'm a big fan of pressing the F9 key. There are a lot of options in here, and we'll be sure to cover them all in a later tutorial, but for now, just go down to information editors, or you can hit up and it'll take you down to the bottom of the list. So we can hit up and then go to information editors. Next, go to edit map connections to open the map connections debug menu. Here, we can see our test town and a bunch of empty blue space in the canvas around it. This is because it has no map connection set up. At any time, we can press the D key and that will open the list of commands. There's A to add a new map to the canvas, delete to delete the selected map from the canvas, as well as S to browse to another map and view that map's connections. For example, if we press S and go up to Route 3, we can see Route 3's connections. As another pro tip, to browse through this map list quickly, you can press the A and S keys. So what we can do is we can press A, and let's go down to say Route 3. There we go, we've now loaded Route 3, and look at how many maps are connected to Route 3. We can left click and drag anywhere in the canvas also to browse the list. Look at this is pretty cool, huh? We can also use the arrow keys to move around. As you can see from the example maps here, the Map Connections editor is a great way to visualize the layout of your maps and your region as a whole. Just be careful when connecting multiple big maps together that each have a lot of events, since that can cause the game to lag. Now, let's go back to our test town. I'm gonna press S, and then I'm gonna press the S key a few more times and go to test town. And then let's press A and select a new map to add to our connection. What we wanna do is we wanna add Route 1, so we can hit enter and select it. Now what we need to do is we need to left click and drag them and make sure to line them up real nice. There we go, now we've put test town on the left here, and Route 1 is on the right, and they're flush along the edges. These maps are now connected, and we should be able to walk between them in-game. As a general rule, I would recommend that you do not overlap the maps, and instead make sure to align them along their edges. Now, let's press escape, and make sure to save our changes, and then exit from the editor. When doing this, you can also notice in the console window that the PBS file map_connections.txt was just updated. Now, let's close our debug menu and walk over to our map connection. It's right on over here. Whoa, look at this. Oh my goodness, that looks like a route up ahead. As we cross over the threshold, we can also notice that our music changes and we're on the new map. Look at that, that's pretty freaking cool, huh? Using map connections like this, we can begin to make an entire region map if we wanted to. And that's it for episode 2. To access my tutorial website, please check the link in the video description. As a reminder, this tutorial is for Pokémon Essentials version 20, so if a newer version is released in the future, such as version 21, it is possible that the layout or names of some of the debugs or files will be changed. In general though, this series should get you where you need to go when it comes to making your own Pokémon fan game. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you learned something, and I hope that you have a good one. Remember to like and subscribe for more tutorials in the future. Bye now!